You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist.
White people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them.
Absolutely. They would be wise.
Have you ever had sex?
No, absolutely not.
Wow, says the guy who's never got laid. He literally told followers, women, they get old, they get fat, they get ugly, they get very annoying.
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we're going to be doing a bit more of an analytical deep dive into the Piers Morgan versus Nick Fuentes interview. Now, this one is probably the interview or the debate of the year so far, with two very significant figures who represent completely and utterly different worldviews. Nick Fuentes is 27 and represents much of the right-wing youth, transgressive, boisterous, and controversial sort of world.
People calling me gay because I've never had a girlfriend. I think if anything, it makes me less gay. And, you know, it's all gay.
That was the Christmas episode, by the way.
Along with
See that? It's fun. They're laughing because it's funny.
Piers Morgan, however, is born at the tail end of the boomer generation, is 60 years old, and represents the typical centre-left liberals. And it's a very interesting one to break down strategically. The main strategy issue for Nick is which bullets he is willing to bite. Will he say that he's racist or anti-Semitic, or will he deny those allegations? And for Piers, the goal is a little less straightforward. There are a few different ways in which he could go about it, and we're going to get more into this as we go. So let's get into this and break it down play by play. Make sure you let me know in the comments who you think won the debate, and then at the end, I'll give my analysis as to who I think won. So with that, let's get into it.
There is a belief that you have two personas. There's one that you roll out now for podcasts and for shows like mine, where you come across as reasonable. And then there's your show on Rumble, where you often come across as having, you know, a very unreasonable view on things. This is what Coleman Hughes said about you.
Nick Fuentes knows exactly what he's doing. He is consciously playing this double game as part of a long-term strategy to become popular enough to take the reins of power, at which point he plans to pivot towards the extreme and unpopular policies that he advocates daily on Rumble.
So first of all, what is your response to that?
Well, first of all, I would say that Coleman Hughes is a propagandist. He works for the Free Press, which is run by Barry Weiss. So I think you have to consider the source. And Barry Weiss is a pro-Israel partisan. Free Press is just bought out by CBS for $150 million by Larry Ellison, or his son David Ellison. And so I think that's coming from a particular point of view. We can't pretend like that's coming from a vacuum or from some fixed position. That's coming from a propaganda outlet that's in favor of Israel. That's first. But second, I would say he is right about the two personas. And I think that everybody understands this on some level. On my show, I make jokes and I use rhetoric and I'm hyperbolic because for a long time, I had an audience that was small on these like dissident platforms. I was on D Live for many years. A lot of people don't even know what that is. And so I had a small following and we had sort of like an in-group sense of humor and memes and things like that. And you talk about it one way on a freewheeling live stream when I'm by myself and I'm ranting and we make jokes and we play devil's advocate, we play with different positions. But then when you sit down in an interview like this one and people ask me a good faith question, what do you actually believe? Well, then I clarify and I say, well, here I'm not joking. Here I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not being rhetorical. I'll tell you precisely what I believe. As far as this idea that I'm going to get power and then turn into Hitler, that just sounds totally insane to me. I'll be honest. It just sounds insane.
Do you have aspirations for political power?
Not really. I think that if I wanted to run for office, I wouldn't say a lot of the things that I say. I don't know that a lot of people would vote for me. I tend to offend everybody, even a lot of people that like me. So no, I'm a truth teller. I like to tell the truth. I like to do my live stream.
So, I mean, it's a little disingenuous here, I think, to say that Nick has two personas, when in reality, people have multiple modes of promoting themselves. I mean, When you are around your parents, you're probably going to act different than when you're around a group of friends. Does this mean that you have two personas? Or does this just mean that you're a multifaceted individual? And this effect is actually amplified when you are a public figure. And I'll use myself as an example here. If somebody went through all of my lives and clipped up the worst parts, you'd probably have a different picture of me. When I'm live streaming, I lean into hyperbole and do less self-censoring and make jokes I wouldn't necessarily make in a polished video. Streaming is entertainment. You lean into comedy, you interact with your audience, and you sort of play off each other. And the whole idea is to have engagement, to have a good time and have a bit of fun. But when I'm debating or being interviewed, I'm stating my views in a more serious and precise way. These aren't different personas necessarily, they're just different modes of communication shaped by the setting, the tone, and the audience. And speaking of streaming, I do go live, lots on this channel, 5, 6, 7 times a week. So make sure to hit that notification bell. Now let's get into the next part, guys. But before then, I need to introduce you to the sponsor of today's video, Black Forest Supplements. And what I'm about to show you is the reason why Europe pulled this off its shelves in 2022. Not because it was unsafe, but because it became too popular too fast. And the regulators did not know how to handle it. Classic move, right? Especially when pharma companies are working on their own version of the product. Now you've probably heard the noise around NMN. People are talking about NAD plus and energy, metabolism, and all of that.
For the next 30 days, I'm going to be taking anti-aging supplement NMN.
And there's this constant debate over why the cheaper supplement versions keep getting so much attention. Well, instead of listening to influencers, here's some people to actually pay attention to. Professor David Sinclair from Harvard Medical School. Watch this.
Of the people that I know that look freakishly and unusually young for their age, that I have met in, say, the last 36 months, I cannot get over how many of them have told me that I'm on NAD and I'm on metformin. And I'm talking about everywhere from a gym to a golf course to a business meeting. And I'm talking about visually, shockingly looking young people, mainly people in their 50s that look like they could be in their 30s or early 40s to me. So when you say NAD, do you believe in the IV therapy? Do you believe in the stuff you can inject with subcutaneously? Or are you speaking specifically about this precursor that you were referencing?
Well, what I believe doesn't so much matter, but the scientific evidence points to taking a supplement every day, a gram of NMN, which is this precursor, stands for nicotinamide mononucleotide for the aficionados. Just swallowing one of those, or 1,000 milligrams, is enough to double your NAD.
So yeah, people have been hunting this down. And if you're looking for it, Black Forest's NMN is the go-to. Made in the US, GMP certified. And best of all, their Christmas deal is 40% off for the next 48 hours. All you got to do is go to that link below in the top of the comments or at the bio, Black Forest Supplements /Jake, and get your 40% today. That, get back into the clips.
I always believe everybody is a product of their environment. Right? I've interviewed thousands of people. Maybe 3, 4, 5,000 people from all different walks of life. But the one common theme I would say is everyone's a product of their environment. And I was reading some stuff about you in the last few days. There was an episode of your podcast where you talked about your father, Bill Fuentes, and how he wouldn't take the family, including you, to certain restaurants because he believed they were associated with African Americans. We would be deciding where to go to eat, you said. What are we going to do for dinner tonight? It was a running joke. Me and my sister would say Applebee's, and my dad would say we would never eat at Applebee's. Not in a million years should you be caught dead, Fuentes said about Applebee's. Go to a different restaurant, a local restaurant. No Applebee's, no Red Lobster. That is commonly known as black fare. And you also shared another story about your family and restaurants. It said, before me and my sister were born, my family had a saying about Olive Garden that contains the N-word that we're not allowed to say. So my question, based on that anecdote that you say on your own podcast, is do you think you grew up in a racist environment, that your father was inherently racist, and that thought process moved to you?
Well, I would say it's a new low. I've been attacked for being a racist many times, but to attack my father, to attack my parents based on anecdotes, I would say that's sort of a new low.
Hang on, it's your anecdote.
Yeah, but he's not here to defend himself.
You are.
And my parents are.
You told the story.
And I will. And I'll
I'm not trying to ambush you. As I said at the start, Nick, to be clear.
No, it's not an ambush.
Nick, to be clear,
I think everybody
I'm not
understands.
ambushing you. I'm literally reading an anecdote that you revealed on your podcast. It's you that's put it in the public domain.
I know.
I'm simply asking you whether my assessment of that, which is that your father didn't want to take you to certain restaurants because of what you refer to as, they were commonly known as black fare, whether that attitude to African Americans in that instance permeated to you. It's a reasonable question.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think everybody knows what that is, but I'll address it. I'll engage with it, and I'll defend my father from the charge of racism.
So I don't personally know anything about Nick's dad. I don't know if he was a racist or anything like that. I have little information in that regard, but I'm not even going to try and find out. Because the way that I do things in this space and the way that other people that I know tend to do things for the most part is to just completely keep people's families out of it. But instead of that, Piers decided to actually call out Nick's family and his dad by name, which is actually doxing him.
Your father, Bill Fuentes.
And essentially calls him a racist. And in my opinion, this was designed to actually rattle Nick at the start here, to try and really get him off balance. And you can see this by the fact that he can see that Nick doesn't want to talk about this, but he keeps on poking the pain point.
I've been attacked for being a racist many times, but to attack my father, to attack my parents based on anecdotes, I would say that's sort of a new low.
Hang on, it's your anecdote.
So I do want to be neutral here and give this a fair shake for both Piers and Nick, but in my eyes, Piers definitely lost some points in this exchange. Let's move on.
You've also said you don't want to live near black people. Let's take a listen to this clip.
I'm a new generation of white person. I'm not living around blacks. Sorry. You know, I want white kids, and I don't want my white kids bringing home black people to marry. It's racial for me. And call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
I mean, it couldn't be clearer, really, unless you want to say that's another of your jokes. But you're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist. I think everybody, the only people that aren't racist or pretend not to be are white people to their detriment.
All right, so this is where the strategy really starts to come into it. So Nick made an interesting and very deliberate choice here. I'd call it a calculated gamble. He simply admits to being racist instead of pretending not to be. A kind of ballsy move, especially with the term as loaded as racist.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist.
Now, optically, for Piers and the people that he's appealing to, this could be seen as a win because he adopts the label, and then Piers can keep on hammering about it the whole entire debate. And this for him means headlines and viral moments in his mind. This essentially gives Piers the soundbite that he needs.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally.
A clear, unambiguous soundbite that could ride over everything else. But at the same time, Nick biting this bullet cuts off Piers' ability to be able to corner him and hit him with a bunch of different follow-ups because there's essentially nothing else to draw out. Tactically for Nick, this kind of avoids that whole drawn-out conversation. But what really stood out here, though, was up to this point, nobody actually defines what racist means. They were arguing about the word racism without actually establishing its meaning. And this actually just makes the entire exchange much more rhetorical than it is substantive. But as we jump ahead here in the next clip, we can get a clearer vision of what Nick actually means by the term racism.
So I want to play you another clip. This is what you talk about why white people are justified in being racist. Let's take a listen to this.
First, white people are every single bit justified in being racist. Every single bit justified, to the extent that that means going out of your way to avoid black people when you see them.
You stand by that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So white people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them?
Absolutely. They would be wise.
Why?
Because it's a lose-lose proposition. If you're Irina Zarutska and you don't walk the other way, you get stabbed to death and you die.
So that actually gives us a bit more perspective on what Nick means here. He said to the extent that that means going out of your way to avoid black people when you see them. Now, that might be considered racist by a lot of people, but it certainly isn't your classic definition of racism. He's saying that due to the numbers and the statistics and the crime rates and all of these sorts of things, he doesn't want to be around black people or live around them. He thinks that that's a security risk and he would rather avoid them. He didn't actually say he hates them. And I think if he actually leaned into the meaning of racism, and particularly the modern liberal meaning of racism, that would have actually helped him a lot. That would have allowed him to double down even more, and it would have taken the sting off the label. But I just don't really think that Fuentes necessarily cares about that sort of thing. And what Piers would have been better off doing here in my mind would be to get the traditional classic definition of racism, which is the hatred of an individual or a group of people purely based on their skin or their race or ethnicity or whatever it is, and asked Nick if that's what he meant by racism. And then Nick might have had to backtrack, but he didn't do that. What he did was he just went for the clip, and essentially all he wanted to do was just assign the label so that he could keep repeating it. But anyways, let's move on.
How do you feel about mass shootings at school?
I think they're bad.
Who do you think commits the vast majority of the mass shootings?
I'm sure it's
schools?
white people.
Right. So how do you feel about that?
I think that white people do more antisocial violence. I think black people participate in more gang violence. I think that's the difference.
What's the difference to the victims?
There's no difference to the victim, but it's a different kind of crime, and it's a different proportion also. Do you know what percentage of white people are school shooters?
I know that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools in America this century were perpetrated by young white men. And I'm
what proportion?
I'm curious.
What proportion?
I'm curious whether your advice would be to people who have kids in these schools.
Wait, is my mic working? What proportion?
Should they avoid white people at school? Should people with the kids at school avoid young white men at school?
No.
Okay.
Do you know what per capita means? Do you know proportionality? There are more black people proportionally that engage in violent crime or are involved in gangs, especially in these major cities, than there are white people that are school shooters compared to the entire white population. And everybody understands that.
Two-thirds of mass shootings at school perpetrated by white people.
But what proportion of white men commit school shootings? That's the question.
I've just told you. It's 60 to 65% of school shootings by white people.
You're telling me what proportion of school shootings are committed by white people. I'm saying what proportion of white people have committed school shootings. Are you playing dumb or are you just not that smart?
What difference does that make to the children lying dead on the ground?
See, now you want to jump on the victims. The difference is you're asking, would you fear white people or black people? And that's the difference. The difference is in terms
what I'm saying to you is by your logic, if we now have agreed that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools are committed by white people and predominantly young white men, then presumably your advice would be to avoid young white men because they perpetrate these massacres. But it won't be because they're white, right?
So are you playing dumb or are you actually dumb?
Maybe
it's
I'm
about
dumb.
proportionality.
Maybe I'm dumb.
You are because you're, well, I don't think you are dumb. I think you're smart actually, but you're deliberately avoiding per capita. And everybody knows that's the difference. What proportion of white men are school shooters? It's probably 0.00001%. What proportion of black men have committed violent crimes? It's probably like 5%. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's very high. And I would add to that, even as it concerns schools, why do you think parents pay a super high property tax to live in a school district where there's white people? Because they know that if they go to the black school, it's going to be the Bloods and the Crips. It's going to be gangs. It's going to be, you talk about school shootings. Nobody talks about all the school shootings that are committed by gangbangers in and around the school and all the other violence that's associated with that. I mean, these schools in the south side of Chicago, it's just not livable.
I have an answer for you, Nick. So the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings is actually the same for black and white.
For white people, the proportion of
the proportion
again,
of the population.
are you hearing it? No.
See,
What's
I think the trouble with your statistics is a lot of them don't bear much scrutiny. We have a bunch of fact checkers checking all this in real time because you do have a tendency to just come out with a lot of old baloney. And when you say, well, it's true. And when you're confronted with reality, you don't like it.
What's the figure? What proportion of white people have committed school shootings? With white people as the denominator and white people that have committed school shootings as the numerator, what's that percentage?
For both black and whites, the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings generally is about the same.
No. Tell me the number, and then
the only focus of your attention is the black shootings, the black crime. You don't want to live around black people. You want to avoid black people. You don't want interracial marriages or relationships that may produce black people. And yet, when I point out to you that there are many parts of crime in America where actually there's a majority of white people that perpetrate them, you don't care. You don't have any interest in that. It doesn't exercise your mind. Maybe because
no one's buying this.
Have
this
kids.
argument lost. No one is buying this. Everybody understands per capita, and people can even see what you race ahead and say, well, we're comparing the proportion of white and black school shooters. I said, no, compare the proportion of school shooters that are white versus violent criminals that are black, because that was the basis of the monologue, is that you're very likely, if you encounter black people or a young black man in the city, that you're going to be the victim of a violent crime, of a robbery, a mugging, a car theft, a carjacking, or a murder. That's the difference, and it's about proportionality. And everybody sees past that because we all live in reality.
So Piers deflects really sharply here. He shifts the discussion from crime statistics to school shootings, which is a completely different topic. And optically, I think that this hurts Piers. When you're debating numbers, you need to understand absolute figures, per capita rates, and context. Otherwise, you just end up comparing categories that don't match. If white Americans, who make up roughly 60% of the population, were committing 90% of school shootings, that would signal a major disproportionality. In reality, the data on mass shootings, including school shootings, generally shows that whites make up a little over half of identified perpetrators, while being about 60% of the US population. In other words, the raw number is too high, but proportionally, it roughly mirrors population share. Now, this is a serious national problem, but it's not one that necessarily maps onto any racial demographic. And Piers even admits that the proportionality is the same, meaning that Piers deflected from a statistic where there was serious disproportionality to one where there wasn't. And that was a serious problem for Piers, because if his redirection was towards a crime where white people were really overrepresented, then it would have maybe posed a problem for Nick. But instead, this actually made his position look really weak, and it left people with the impression that perhaps Piers Morgan doesn't understand what per capita means. Let's move on.
You don't believe people should get married, right?
I think people should get married. I'm a Christian.
But you're basically anti-marriage, really. You've talked about this. You've talked about.
Are we done talking about white genocide?
Well, no, I'm coming to the same part, because you seem very resistant to the idea of marriage. You've never got married. You've talked very scathingly about henpecked husbands. Just take a look.
That's true.
Guys get to a certain age and they're like, you know what? Women suck. Like, they're talking too much. They're not hot anymore. Like, you're fat, you're chubby, you're not as hot as you think you are. You fucking talk too much, you're a bitch.
So we'll obviously get to the brazen misogyny part of that a little later, but I'm just curious. On the one hand, there's this terrible genocide going on of white people. On the other hand, you want people effectively to stop going near women because they all turn out to be so ghastly, so they shouldn't presumably procreate. So how does that work? I mean, aren't you, with your rhetoric, actively encouraging men not to associate with these ghastly women, therefore not have any more children? Therefore, you are contributing, Nick Fuentes, to the diminishing white population. I'm confused.
I tell my followers to get married all the time. I tell them that it's best for everybody to get married. And I think that's the only way that you can have sex. I think that's the only licit way as a Catholic, as you know, to have sex is within marriage.
Why don't you get married?
I'll get married later. It's been difficult for me because people are shooting at me at my house. I don't know that I don't want to have kids and a wife. You know, my wife would be screaming about that. Me, you know, I have to be able to take risks and be able to say these things. It's difficult to bring a family into a life that's like that. But for my followers, I tell them to get married. But what's happening with women?
You literally just told your followers, well, hang on, in that clip, you literally told followers, women, they get old, they get fat, they get ugly, they get very annoying. So where's the incentive to get married to women? There isn't one. You're actively telling them the opposite.
You're extrapolating a lot. We can complain.
Just quoting you back yourself again.
No, but you're extrapolating and saying, well, you say women are annoying, so therefore, what's the incentive? We have to do it in spite of the fact that they are annoying. We have to do it in spite of the fact that they talk too much. We can get them to lose weight. We can put them on peptides. We can get them to the promised land, but it's going to be
Do you think this view of women may be why none of them want to go near you?
Oh, you should see my DMs. It is quite the opposite. They're called the Groy Bets, and I'm actually batting them away. Granted, not all of them are attractive. Some of them are attractive.
Are you actually? Just to clear up one of the many theories about you, I've no idea what the answer is, and you haven't got to answer. But are you actually attracted to women?
I am attracted to women.
You're not gay?
No. But I will say that women are very difficult to be around.
Okay.
So
there's that.
And do you think they should have the right to vote?
I do not. No, absolutely not.
They should stay at home?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
See, basically, you're just a misogynist old dinosaur, aren't you? For a young guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm the
Yeah.
boomer. I know I'm the boomer here, but actually, you're a 27-year-old dinosaur, aren't you? Aren't you, Nick Fuentes? All women.
I am.
All women are annoying. All women grow
fossil.
old. They all get fat. Says the guy. Have you ever had sex?
No, absolutely not.
Wow. Says the guy who's never got laid. Wow.
That's the thing, though. You boomers, it's
Do you think
always
you're an
get
expert
laid,
in women?
free love.
Given you've never got laid?
Yeah, we are going back to the Stone Age. You're absolutely right. This, you know, you're talking about empathy and your kids are empathetic and they would never laugh at a joke about the Holocaust and you're a misogynist. You're a simp yourself. You're totally henpecked. That's the problem. So we are going back to the way
another clip of yours.
Okay, so here we have Piers starting off by actually strawmanning Nick's position on marriage.
You want people effectively to stop going near women because they all turn out to be so ghastly, so they shouldn't presumably procreate.
One of the things that Fuentes is very much known for is his Catholicism, and an important part of that faith is marriage. Now, he has certain feelings about marriage in his own life, and he has certain feelings about women and being around women and all these sorts of things. But I don't think, to my knowledge, he's ever said anything explicitly anti-marriage or he's ever encouraged his audience to not get married. And Piers didn't actually bring up examples of this. And I think that if he could have, he would have. But by saying that women are X and Y, that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't marry them.
Women, they get old, they get fat, they get ugly, they get very annoying.
And this would be a hasty generalization. It's a logical fallacy where somebody jumps to a broad conclusion with far too little evidence. You can think that women are annoying and hard to be around and all of these sorts of things, yet still value women and still marry them. And furthermore, you can also hold these thoughts whilst at the same time giving a societal prescription that's pro-marriage. And another thing that I wanted to point out here was that Piers Morgan, another optical L here that he took, was actually mocking Fuentes about his sex life.
Have you ever had sex?
No, absolutely not.
Wow. Says the guy who's never got laid.
And was mocking Fuentes, calling him a dinosaur and all these sorts of things.
But actually, you're a 27-year-old dinosaur, aren't you? Aren't you, Nick Fuentes?
And for me, a really good way to contrast this with a better approach would be the approach that Tucker Carlson took, where he takes more of a fatherly tone, if you will, with Nick, and he approaches the topic with a little bit more wisdom.
Every happily married woman is non-liberal.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine. There's no category for happily married middle-aged liberal woman. There isn't, never been one.
Right.
So like maybe the job is to, make a girl happy and like all this nonsense ends.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that could be a bottomless pit too, because the one critique I have of the men is, and you're right about this, they enable this behavior.
Well, that's for sure.
It's epidemic of simps who, and especially with Christians, I've noticed this. This is why Andrew Tate has so much appeal, and the Christians are kind of losing this conversation. Andrew Tate's a Muslim polygamist who is very chauvinistic, and you could even argue it as someone who has ran an OnlyFans site himself, like is not an observer, let's say, of Christian sexual morality.
No.
But men are going with him because he's putting women in their place. He's talking about patriarchy and women's place in a society like that. Whereas Christian men, Catholics, Protestants alike, are both kind of tone policing the men. And they worship their wives. They worship the women, put them on a pedestal. And they, they kind of get bossed around. They get henpecked by the women.
I think we're required to love our wives. Like that's, all over the New Testament. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. That seems like a very natural balance to me.
Yeah, and I think that you have to love your wife as your wife.
Yeah.
A lot of men...
As opposed to what? Your mom?
Well, no, like your buddy.
No.
Because I hear this all the time, and I hate this. Guys will say, I married my best friend. And I think, she's your wife. She's not your best friend. Because there's a difference.
What is the difference?
I think that when you talk about your best friend, you're a peer. You're an equal. And I think your best friendships are with other men. And I think that your wife ultimately is subordinate to you. She's your helpmate. Yeah. And ultimately, as the man in the marriage and as the father, you have authority
the final say over the household.
Well,
And
of course.
she can give advice. It's not to say I'm not a freak where you say, shut up, woman. I mean, of course, you discuss things with your wife and your wife gives input, but the authority rests with the man.
Of course. Of course. But God set up this kind of amazing system where men are physically stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, of course, you could make your wife do whatever you wanted. You're bigger than she is.
Right.
But he also instilled in men this desire to please your wife. Like, that's a very natural
Yeah.
thing. You want your wife to be happy.
Absolutely.
And the whole happy wife, happy life thing is completely real. It's like you can't get away from it. It's not like all of these things. It's not a choice. It's the biological reality that you live with, that you were born with. Like, you want your wife to be happy. And if she's unhappy, you're unhappy to a much greater extent than vice versa, right?
Yeah.
I think men care about their wives being happy much more than wives care about their husbands being happy.
Yes.
I have noticed. And that's compensation for their lack of physical power.
Mhm.
That's my view of it. And that's why it is this kind of perfect balance. But somebody needs to be the final decision maker. I completely agree. And when you give up that, when you abrogate that, there's no respect, there's unhappiness, and then there's infidelity.
Right. Well, that's the ingredient that's missing. The way I would put it very succinctly is men right now are the responsible party, but have no authority. And that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
You know, if the buck stops with you and you're to blame and you're the responsible one, then you also need to be able to have the final say and call the shots. And one without the other doesn't work. And I think I
think that's really smart and absolutely right.
So you can see there that definitely would have actually made Nick think about his position. And Piers Morgan wasn't completely wrong when he says, if you have a relationship with a woman, then maybe your mind will change. So I think that was the total wrong approach, and Tucker's was completely correct. But one of the most interesting contradictions in this whole debate actually was when Piers Morgan starts shaming Nick Fuentes about being a virgin. I mean, Piers Morgan, like Nick, presents himself as a Catholic. And in Catholic teaching, premarital sex isn't just discouraged, it's actually a mortal sin.
You've never got laid?
So in that context, I mean, Piers ends up mocking Nick Fuentes for adhering to the exact principle and doctrine that both men claim to believe. So anyways, guys, in conclusion to all of this, I would say that this is a very interesting one when you look at it in terms of a winner. I don't really think that many minds were necessarily changed by this. Piers Morgan, for me, went into this debate wanting to get various different optical victories by getting Nick Fuentes to admit that he was a racist, misogynist, and all of these sorts of things. If you read the tabloid news at the moment, the mainstream news, they're all very much siding with Piers Morgan. And this is the sort of crowd that he is appealing to, the liberal boomer elites. Whereas Fuentes definitely won the debate and he won the exchanges, that's for sure. And you can see that he's getting a lot of kudos from the YouTube comments, and you can see that he's getting a lot of kudos on Twitter and all of these sorts of things. But when you're thinking about objectives, I think that Piers Morgan got his clicks and he got the controversy and the tabloid sort of journalist hit piece that he was searching for, and he got the admissions and the labels that he was searching for. And Nick won the actual debate and has won over large portions of the internet with it, which is what he was searching for. So for me, I think that Piers Morgan lost, but in terms of objectives, it's a little bit harder to say. But anyways, looking forward to reading all of your comments below on this one. Certainly a fascinating one to dive into. And don't forget, guys, check out Black Forest supplements just below there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you'd like to watch another video, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.